Hey, today I'm going to create an archer that'll be good for most beginner players. This archer is going to be made to fill a vital role in the group, the ranged damage dealer. The closest comparison in video game terms would be DPS, or damage per second. This archer won't be attacking faster than anyone else like in video games, but they'll probably be attacking more and hitting more, resulting in more damage. So let's get started. I'm going to build this character all the way out as a level 1 character and then show you how the character progresses through the levels to make a solid archer. I'm going to keep it fairly simple. You get a lot thrown at you up front in this game, so I want to build a character that you can play while you learn the basics, but also at the same time not give you a bad character for the sake of simplicity. Lastly, I'm going to try to stick with the cliches and stereotypes so that you know what they are and you can see why they work. From there, you can decide where you want to go, either stick with them or break the mold. If you have questions, hopefully this video will answer most of them. If not, you can leave a comment and I'll try to help you out. If you ask most people that enjoy Dungeons & Dragons or D&D, 5th edition or 5e, where you would start, they're likely going to tell you to start with a character concept. You can think of a movie or show or comic book character to base your character around. Or you can think about how you would write an interesting character in like a medieval story or gothic novel. So that's where I'm going to start. For the concept of this character, we're going to make her a sort of tourist. She wants to go to the beautiful destinations. Her way of decompressing is getting out into nature away from people. So her non-combat role can be the nature guide. She's a natural archer and doesn't like to train. And she doesn't avoid risky adventure. She doesn't take unnecessary risk, but adventure with risk comes with its own kind of satisfaction for her. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see me build more characters. So first, we're going to choose our class. Many D&D sources have you start with race, and that's fine. But if we're going to choose our role in the game, I think the first place you should look is your class. I think the best class for a beginner to make an archer with is Fighter! The reason we're going with Fighter is because they have strong abilities for archer builds. The cliche choice would have been to take Ranger, but in my experience, when a beginner wants an archer, they want to shoot things with their bow and tend not to use their spells. Rangers have some abilities that wouldn't even get used in an entire 10-level campaign. Also, unless you have someone experienced helping you out, every other time you level up, you have to read through a list of 10 spells and try to figure out what it does, how it works, if it's useful, and if you like it for your character. And that's a lot for a new player when they're still trying to get a feel for how using a bow and arrow works best in combat. So I recreated a ranger using the fighter class that has abilities that you'll use often and is arguably just as good at archery. Next, we're going to start putting numbers into abilities. There are 3 ways you get numbers to put into these abilities, and the Dungeon Master, or DM, is the one who decides what method to use. There's rolling, which I can't predict what you're going to roll, so I'm not going to use that method for this video. There's point buy, which can get pretty complicated, and I'm trying to keep it simple. So I'm going to use something called the standard array, which is a set group of numbers that the designers of the game decided would be both pretty normal for rolling and give you a high number, a low number, and a variety in between. Later, I'm going to convert these ability scores to modifiers. If that sounds confusing, don't worry, it's not. Just keep in mind for later that only even numbers convert. There are a few exceptions, but in general, odd numbers don't do anything. So here's the standard array from highest to lowest. We have to assign each of these numbers to an ability. These abilities need to support our concept in both combat and role-playing. So if you're thinking to yourself, geez, I'm not even 5 minutes into making a character and I already have to put numbers that I don't know what they do next to words that I don't even know what they mean in the game, don't worry about it. Just follow along. Even if you don't understand when I'm done, everyone understands eventually as they play, level up, and make more characters. I like to start with the highest number first. With this character, this is where I need to decide if she's a little better at her combat role or her role-playing role. I think she's going to meet her goals better by prioritizing her combat role, so I'm just going to place the 15 in Dexterity. Dexterity does a lot of things. It helps you dodge things, and it helps you take your turn sooner when you start combat. But the reason an archer really needs Dexterity is because it makes you aim better. Because our main concern is going to be shooting well, hitting things up close isn't going to be our preferred fighting style. I find it most helpful to choose the character's most important stats first, and then the least important. That way everything else just kind of falls in the middle. That said, the 8 is going to go into, if you guessed strength, you would be right. Strength does a lot in the game too. It determines how much you can carry and how hard you can swing a sword, among other things. But I have to make a sacrifice, and since you're going to try to stay away from the front lines, strength is a good option. All right, I got the high number and the low number, also lovingly referred to as a dump stat. Now let's work our way down highest to lowest. So I'm going to put the 14 in Constitution. With a higher Constitution, she'll get more hit points every level and have the fortitude to resist things like being poisoned. So next, we've got a 13, and I'll put that into Intelligence. She's a logical thinker, knows a great deal about her interests, and likes to read a good book on a rainy day. Who doesn't? She also needs to be able to take in information and resist others' charm, which is why we're going to put the 12 in Wisdom. In Dungeons & Dragons, wisdom is your ability to perceive things, gain insight, or resist someone's ability to manipulate your mind. If your physical health gets you out of bed and gets you to work, your mental health lets you do your job and do it well. That's what the wisdom score will do for us. It will help us stay mentally in the game. And that leaves us with our last score. And the 10 we're going to put into Charisma. Even though she lacks social skills, her helpfulness and looks even her out to be basically average. But that's okay, because being the party spokesperson is not her role. For our race, I chose the most cliche race in the game for an archer, and that's the elf. I chose high elf for a little variety, and so the player can get a little taste of magic. As you can see here, I've added a 2 to my dexterity, bringing that to a 17, and I've added a 1 to my intelligence to make that a 14. I've also given you the modifiers, and this is why odd numbers don't do much for you. When you have a 10 for an ability, you get a 0 for a modifier. For every additional 2 points over 10 that you have in your ability, you'll get an additional +1 to your modifier. So that 17 dexterity might as well be a 16, but there's nothing I can do about it at this point. For every 2 points you have under 10, you gain -1 point to your modifier, like in strength. A lot of people like to role play these low abilities, and I'd encourage that for fun's sake. So in this case, because her strength is below 10, I'd probably play her up as always complaining about her back whenever it comes to heavy lifting or having to carry things. We're going to work our way through the rest of the elven traits now. In the game, gender doesn't have to take a role, but since I'm going for a little variety in my builds, I'm going to make this character a female. If this is an issue for you, you can change the gender. It's not going to have an effect on the character at all. Since this is a stereotypical female elf, I'm gonna try to give her a pretty name, Isla Dewpetal. Isla's age is 110, which isn't old for an elf. She's a young adult with a few years of traveling and exploring. She's also chaotic good, which means she's motivated to help good people and fight evil, but she mostly ignores rules and laws. Elves are medium in size, which is typical. Isla's 5'2", which can make some people underestimate her, but height really doesn't matter much in the game. It's mostly for visualization. In general, you want your character to be on the light side of normal for their race. This is because when you ride animals or cross rickety bridges, your weight's going to be taken into consideration. With her weight, I wanted her as small as possible for this reason, and because she only has an 8 strength, and because she's short. Weight in the game is based off pounds, but you can consider them units if you're more familiar with the universal system of measurements. Same with distance and speed, just think of them as units. To explain the speed, I'd have to explain combat, and I'm not going to do that right now. Just know that a normal speed is 30. Elves get the Elven language, also called Elvish and Common. For an extra language as a high elf, I'm taking Gnomish. Someone in the party should have it, and let's just say you like to read books by gnome authors in their native language. Elves also get proficiency in perception, which is great because it's the most used skill in the entire game. Elves get dark vision out to 60 feet and advantage on charm and sleep spells and effects. Advantage is when you roll 2 20-sided dice and take the highest number. You get trance, which means that instead of needing 8 hours of sleep, you only need 4 hours of meditation. So you'll be the primary night guard when the party needs to sleep outside. And high elves also got 1 cantrip, which is a spell that you can cast as many times as you want. For her cantrip, I'll take Ray of Frost. I was going to take Mending for theme reasons, you may figure out later in the video, but you might never use that spell. However, Ray of Frost you can use quite frequently. I'll go over what it does later. So now let's go to your background. A background isn't necessarily going to determine who you are or your personality, but it can. And in this character, it'll help sculpt those personality traits and motivations. Being an Outlander gives you 2 more skills, so we're going to add athletics and survival. For a tool proficiency, we had to pick a musical instrument, so we're going to pick flute so you can mimic wild bird calls. For language, we're going to take Orc because you've had to trade with them for years to survive in more savage locations. For equipment, she has a set of traveler's clothes, a staff for walking and poking things, your lucky wolf's foot, a belt pouch with 10 gold because people don't always trade fresh fruit for squirrel pelts, and a hunting trap, which is actually a bear trap that does damage and everything. You also get the Wanderer attribute. When your DM tells you you're getting lost, you, as a Wanderer, will get to tell your DM that your character remembers how to get out of there, especially if your character has seen a map of the area before. Also, if your party's running low or getting tired of rations, your character can forage for some food and water as long as the environment has something for you. Now we're going to get into your class. This is the part that's really going to give you the body to fill your role as an archer and gives you the tools you need to fight. At first level, you get 10 plus 2 hit points. That's your max die roll plus your constitution modifier. Every class gets starting proficiencies. A general definition of proficiency means that you're skilled or good at something. This is similar. Fighters are proficient with every type of armor and shields, which means she can wear most of it with no problems. Except, she only has an 8 strength. If she tries to wear chain, splint, or plate armor, her speed will slow down 10 feet. Same with weapons. You can use them all and apply your proficiency bonus to the attack roll. Fighters get to pick 2 skills from their list. Isla's going to take acrobatics and animal handling. Being proficient in skills means that you get to add your corresponding ability modifier and the proficiency bonus to the skill check. You can use other skills, but you're only able to add the corresponding ability modifier to it. At first level, your proficiency bonus is a +2, and that doesn't change unless you take her up to 5th level. At first level, you get to choose between some equipment options. Here, I've already made the good choices for Isla. She'll start with leather armor, a rapier, a shield, a long bow, and 20 arrows. You'll probably want to grab an extra 20 arrows if you can, just in case you have to go a long time without being able to buy some. She'll also start with an explorer's pack so you can get around more or less comfortably. All of your equipment weight totals 113, and your max carrying weight, which is 15 times your strength, is 120. So I would probably eat through some of those rations and burn up some of those torches to lose weight. You have dark vision. If you have 1 torch for starting fires, then you'll probably be fine. We also get to pick our fighting style at first level. With the 6 options available, I'm going to take archery. It gives you a +2 to attack rolls with the longbow that you have. What does the +2 to attack mean? I'm glad you asked. This isn't a video on how to play D&D 5th edition, but because you're a beginner, I need to talk very briefly on one set of rules of the game before moving on so that you understand what I'm talking about next. It's the attack versus armor class rules. It's fairly simple. Everyone in the game has an armor class. The armor class is usually a number between 10 and 20. For physical attacks, whether it be punching, stabbing, or shooting, when you say you want to attack someone, you'll roll a 20-sided die and add a number or 2. We'll get into adding numbers in a minute. If that number you rolled is equal to or higher than their AC number, then you hit them, roll your damage, and the DM subtracts that from their target's hit points. Same if they attack you. They roll, add modifiers, and if they meet or beat your armor class, then they roll for damage and you subtract that from your hit points. In the next slides, I'm going to show you what your attack roll will look like and what your armor class is going to be. In the gray, you can see the calculations for how to get the attack and damage numbers. When you see something like 1d20, the D just means die or dice, and the number, like 20, tells you how many sides the die has. The number before the D tells you how many to roll, so 1d20 is one 20-sided die. In the black is the total attack and damage where I've done the math for you for each weapon. Normally, using your dexterity modifier for an attack is reserved for ranged weapons like your longbow, and you'd have to use your strength modifier for melee attacks like using a longsword or club. But a rapier is considered a finesse weapon. You can use your dexterity modifier. The range on your longbow is 150/600. The first number is the distance that you can shoot before you attack at a disadvantage. Disadvantage is when you roll 2d20 and take the lowest number. For most combats, that range will let you shoot across an entire battlefield with no problems. The second number is your maximum range, so you can't hit anything at all beyond 600. Here I show you your armor and your total armor class. This is the number they have to meet or beat to hit you. An AC of 14 to 16 is average for a first level character. At low levels, the bad guys have +3 to their attacks. More than likely, they'll be able to hit you a little less than half the time. Those odds aren't great, so you'll want to try to keep your distance from the enemies, only getting close if you have to. If you do get hit at first level, you get an ability called Second Wind. Basically, once per long or short rest, you get to heal yourself. You roll a 10-sided die and add your fighter level, in this case a 1, and get that many hit points back. At first level, you'll average 6 hit points. Also at first level, I'd probably use this when I drop below 6 hit points unless someone else is going to heal you. It's a bonus action, so you can attack on your turn and still use it. Now that you have an idea of how attacks and armor class work, I want to circle back around to the cantrip you got because you're a high elf. On occasions, when you run out of arrows or if you need to get away from a creature, you can use Ray of Frost. It does 1d8 points of cold damage, which is almost as much as your arrows, and it will slow them down 10 feet. If an enemy that moves 30 feet per round has gotten close to you, then hit them with this and you'll be able to keep your distance from them even if they're chasing you. Chances are they'll figure out that you're faster than them and go after a slower target. If you want to dig into the wizard cantrips and pick your own, go for it. Next, I'm going to give Isla a short bio, and then after that I'm going to go through the fighter advancement up to 4th level. In the bio, I like to cover their background and class and why they chose it or why their class chose them. I also like to elaborate on their alignment. These are the explanations for Isla Dewpetal. Isla is an outlander because her father hunted as a hobby and because being away from civilization interests her. Her class is fighter because while hunting with her father and wandering in the wilderness, she occasionally has to kill creatures or beasts that try to hunt her. Also, she's had to trade to survive and defend herself from savages that would sooner kill her than trade with her. She's good because she was taught how to be kind and helpful, but she's chaotic because she doesn't really understand rules, especially social norms, and she relies more on logic for her behavior and often acts thoughtlessly about others. Personal characteristics are additional ways to flesh out your character. They help you to get to the core of who they are and how they act with a few sentence synopsis. I usually look at the options given in the background and handpick the ones I think work for my concept, or I'll modify them to fit even better. Occasionally, I'll just come up with my own. For her personality, she'd say, I'm driven by a wanderlust that led me away from home. My interests are animals, especially horses, earth tone colors, hunting, root vegetables, scenic places, and carriage rides. For an ideal, she thinks amazing places and sights should be for everyone to see safely. Sometimes she makes bonds with people because she wants to tell everyone about her interests. She has a bond with her sister and will make special trips to tell her about what she's seen. Her biggest flaws would be that if she wants to go someplace or see something, she rarely takes others into consideration. And if you're boring, she'll ignore you and abruptly change the subject to something she's interested in. I'm really going to set the foundation for her background here. When you create a character, it's usually a good idea to talk about the people closest to them: parents, siblings, best friends, boyfriend, girlfriend, etc. This way, the DM has a way to motivate you to do something or give you help by bringing them into the game to help you. For Isla, every generation of her family has moved from their parents to a new location. Records of her lineage aren't kept, but she knows that her grandfather on her father's side, Ballman, was a stonecutter that would craft amazing public buildings for spectacular elven cities while living outside of the city in his semi-permanent tent with his wife, Andura. In their elderly years, they've managed to move into a nicer home in the city where they are today enjoying a semi-retired life. Her mother's parents are tanners in the village where her parents live. We talked about the grandparents, now we're going to talk about the parents. Her father, Elfodder, moved from a city to a village nestled in a forested valley where he manages the supply and maintenance of the village guard equipment. He also likes the location because it allows him to indulge in his hobby of hunting and trapping. Her mother, Anmia, is a leather worker in the village. She takes the leather her parents tan and crafts it into common items like bags and belts. Her parents aren't married. Instead, they're neighbors on the outskirts of her village where they moved to raise their first daughter, Janyor, jointly while maintaining some boundaries. 10 years later, their fondness for one another brought them Isla. Growing up. Her sister January stayed close to her mother and took up leatherworking as well as embroidering, but Isla was drawn more to her father. In her younger years, she constantly begged to accompany him on his hunting expeditions until she was a proper age, and he took her and taught her how to trap and hunt. Since she was able to walk, she would try to wander outside the protective eyes of her parents. Though she wanted friends to share her experiences with, she never seemed to connect with anyone other than her big sister, who adored her little sister's fearlessness. Isla was a pretty girl and she liked boys of all kinds, but her rough ways and focus on her own interests was always unappealing to the boys. She especially fawned over an immigrant wood elf that her sister eventually married. One day in her early 90s, which elves reach adulthood around 100 years, Isla felt strongly compelled to find out what was on the other side of the woods. So she gathered her gear that she would take on an overnight hunting trip, and without a thought to tell her parents, she headed straight out across the woods for 25 days until she was met with the splendor of a rocky mountain range. She spent a day at the edge of the forest, taking in the view, and then left back home to tell her family what she'd found. Ever since, she's been exploring, staying out longer and longer, and being kind and helpful to those that she meets along the way. If you're just building level 1, you can stop here. You have everything that you need to fill in the blanks on your character sheet. If you want to see how a fighter progresses through the next few levels, then you can keep watching. Let's take Isla up to the second level. At every level, you get to add more hit points. As a fighter, the rules let you either roll a d10 or take the average. I'm going to take the average and add my constitution modifier for 8 more hit points for a total of 20. She'll get 8 hit points every level unless her constitution is raised. At second level, you'll also gain an action surge. Once per long or short rest, you'll get an extra action on your turn. This ability grows in value the more your party takes short rests. Of course, you shouldn't waste this on combats that aren't challenging. If you know you're going to face a boss guy, then hold on to it for that. Let's go to third level next. First, we'll add 8 more hit points for a total of 28. At third level, I have to decide on a subclass for the fighter. Since I'm mostly sticking to the player's handbook for this, I'm just going to choose between Battlemaster and Champion. I'm going to go with Champion. She relies on her natural ability to shoot, so she doesn't want to train or strategically plan. So Battlemaster is out. If you've been playing this character since the first level, by this point you've probably noticed she's one of the main damage dealers in the group. Not by how much damage she deals when she hits, but by how often she hits. This will help her deal more damage and help you get more satisfaction from getting twice as many big hits during combat. Finally, fourth level will give her another 8 hit points. At fourth level, we can select either an ability score improvement or a feat. So I'm going to take a feat. I could have put a point or two in dexterity and added 1 point to my attack, damage, initiative, and a few more things, but I want her archery talents to take a leap by taking sharpshooter. With this feat, any shot you take up to your maximum range is a normal shot, and as long as you can see at least a quarter of their body, they get no bonus to their armor class. So if they're 600 feet away and you can see them from their chest up, you can shoot them as if they were 10 feet away in full view. Additionally, you can subtract 5 from your attack to do an additional 10 points of damage. I'd probably only use this on enemies with a really low AC or when I got a bonus like advantage or the bless spell, but if you're a gambler, you can use this every shot if you want. That's the end of our build. If you like this video and you want to keep seeing more, you can consider donating to the channel via PayPal. Thanks for your support, and please feel free to comment below on the things you'd like to see in future videos. If you thought this video was or would be helpful to someone starting to play D&D, hit that like button. And if you'd like to see more parties built one character at a time, subscribe. That's all for my video. Have a good game.